Hi everyone, welcome back to the Staying Collective. You're about to watch a conversation between me and my friend Trent. We have taken the 3.5 hour trek out of the city of Denver to Steamboat to the hot springs there, Strawberry Hot Spring. We chat through his experience with chronic condition, the diagnosis, anxiety surrounding results, and the things that he's done to make his life a little bit more sustainable, a little bit more joyful, and a little bit more optimized. Let us know if you have any questions for Trent in the comments, and let us know what you think. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Staying Collective. I'm Mikayla. Today I have left my house to head to some hot springs for some R&R with my very good friend Trent.
How's it going?
First of all,
Mm-hmm.
hot springs.
Yes.
We've now been here for 20 hours?
Yeah. Ish.
Ish. What's your experience been like so far?
I really didn't know what to expect because I haven't been to too many hot springs in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just nice to get away from the city.
Yeah.
And have some time being intentional, being in nature. Water is like one of our favorite things, it sounds like.
So true.
So yeah, I think it's just a nice little reset, and literally having no cell service kind of forces you to be like that too.
Yeah, the no cell service has been so nice. And the stars last night, there's something about being in the hot springs, looking up and just seeing all the stars that I feel like was really, really solid. We're bringing you to Staying Collective, not just because you're the best, which you are, but also because, we are a community of folks who are either have chronic illness or have to manage energy or something like that. And I know you've been on a health journey yourself over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but anything that here's my situation, here's reflections
Sure.
I have, whatever feels right, we'd love to hear it.
Okay.
I
don't mind sharing my story. It's a little bit of a longer one.
Yeah, let's hear your story.
So back in middle of 2024, I was working at a brewery at the time. I'm a bartender currently. And I pulled my back out at work. So because it happened at work, I got work comp.
Mm-hmm.
So going through the whole steps, doing physical therapy, stretching, all that stuff. But I started working with a spine specialist. And he was just like, well, if work's covering it, let's get an MRI, see what's going on.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting an MRI, and we're just looking for bulging discs, maybe in some herniated discs, which I have a couple. But they also noticed something on the report. They noticed these nodules. I didn't really think much of it at the time, but the radiologist said, would recommend getting another scan, this time with contrast. So I ended up scheduling another scan about a month later, went in, got another MRI, this time with contrast.
And contrast, for people who don't know, is you drink a lot of a liquid, right?
This one, they actually inject it into you.
Okay.
So you didn't have to drink anything nasty.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah. I know it's not correct to say it's dye. I think that's how most people can kind of understand it. But when you do the contrast, when you do the scan, it just lights everything up. So it's easier for them to kind of see what's going on. So yeah, got that scan with contrast. And then I go back into my doctor's office, and I guess the radiologist report wasn't done. So he actually called the radiologist and was kind of talking with him. And then he comes back into the office, and I was just kind of waiting there for a little bit. And he was like, we talked to the radiologist, and we still aren't sure what these nodules are. And me being ignorant at the time, I was like, well, shouldn't the MRI tell you exactly what it is? As I've learned more, I just think that's really funny now.
I mean, I feel like I would have done the same.
Yeah.
That's why I did the MRI. Tell me everything.
I should know what's going on now.
Yeah, what the heck? Because medicine is always super linear, and you always get your answers right away.
Yeah, very not convoluted at all. It's very straightforward.
Relaxing, stress-free.
Exactly. But so he came back in, and he told me, he's like, and talked to the radiologist, we still aren't sure what those nodules are. And the report came out, it was completed when I was in the office, and the report basically said the nodules could be metastatic, or they could be benign nerve sheath tumors. Metastatic, for anyone who doesn't know, which I certainly did not know when I learned it, is it's cancer that has spread. You kind of hear it big in like medical dramas or all that stuff, but it's basically cancer that's progressed. And then the other stuff is benign nerve sheath tumors. They're tumors that form, at least for me, in the nerve bundles. And for me, that was in my spinal cord and my low back. So neither are ideal. But when I first heard that I might have cancer, I think it's not an understatement to say I was pretty worried and it's like, oh, my life is going to end.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of started this whole journey that I've been on the past 1.5 2 years of really trying to like understand, what it is to kind of live with that. I guess currently I have to get scans for my low back. It started out every 6 months and now I kind of have to do every 8 months. I actually have my next scan coming up in about 2 weeks. And I think anytime, for me at least, I get a scan, the 2 weeks leading up to it can be pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
I will say I only have 2 years of experience doing this. Last year, I was in a much different headspace than I am in now. And I think that's just a testament to, living with something that you really can't do anything about.
Yeah.
And also just like kind of the work that I've done, try to understand what it is to live with this condition and then still try to live a life because life kind of goes on. But yeah, it's been an interesting road. I think it is sometimes really hard to sit with. I don't think it's anything that ever, at least for me, gets better. I think you just learn how to live with it more. And some days are really easy. And some days you're just like, I don't know why this happened to me. I don't know why I have to do this. But I guess you kind of just learn to take the good with the bad. So that's kind of my story in a speedrun process.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah.
And I know like we've chatted a couple of times throughout the process, like we'll grab coffee every quarter or whatever and chat a little bit. And it has been really cool to see your progression. And there are a couple of things that stick out to me in particular, but something you said that I want to focus on, because I think about this sometimes, is like that initial moment of you might have this or you might have this, or when you finally get a diagnosis. Like I very much remember when I got my first autoimmune condition diagnosis, I was 30 and my mom was in the room and because she was like, I need to take notes. And I was like, you don't need to be here. Like, this is my doctor's appointment. I'm 30 years old and I just happen to be with family. And I get this diagnosis. I'm like on a video call because I had to see a specialist in New York, and they give me the diagnosis virtually. And then she kind of explains what it is. And then we get off the call and my mom immediately is like, action, action, action. And I was just like, whoa, I was just diagnosed with an incredibly rare autoimmune disease. Like, take a freaking breath. Like, I need process time. Like, this is one, I have a label on something, which like, I didn't really know what was going on at first. And that's really helpful. But two, it's like, okay, now that it does have a name, like that's tough too, because the first thing you do is or I did, at least, was like, what's my life expectancy? Or like, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
And it's such a tough balance of, especially like I grew up in a family where it's like, you can do anything you put your mind to, or like you can overcome anything, right? And it's like, sometimes I find that mindset to be really harmful, but I also didn't want to settle into this, like, my life is going to be changed forever. My life is going to be terrible. I'm going to die in a year and a half, or like, because the life expectancy is not long, but it's because most people get this when they're like 88.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right. So I'm like, there's something about both waiting for information and then like when you receive information, processing that. And I feel like there's anxiety on both sides of that.
Sure.
And like you said, you feel like you've come a long way. And like when you have a scan coming up or waiting for results of tests or scans, like,
yeah.
Can you talk about a little bit more? I know you said it's out of your control and that mindset helps, but like, I feel like a lot of people who end up with chronic illness are people who like really like control and really like order and like really want to be able to collect all the data and know the outcomes. And I'm just curious where you started, and how you kind of got to where you are with processing information as it comes.
Yeah. I think when I first learned about it, I probably was more in your mom's camp.
Yeah.
I think I know when I first got the news, I was just completely shocked.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what that meant. Was not expecting to get that potential possibility for diagnosis. And I remember just like calling my parents and just like breaking down. It was just like, I think I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty tough conversation to have in general, but particularly with family.
Mm-hmm.
I think what wraps a nice little bow on this is that, going through this, I also have been on like a mental health journey like my whole life, to be quite honest. So I'm not unfamiliar to that world and like doing that type of work. Such work that I actually really like doing. But, going through this process, I think the first time it was just like the first 3 months, I was just in and out of doctor's appointments. And I was very much someone that's like, I need to do something about this. Like, there's got to be something I could do. And I think if you live with something more chronic, and then at least for me starting out, you're like, all right, well, maybe I can do this, or maybe I need to go see the specialist. It's a little bit easier because you're like, all right, I'm doing all these steps, I'm doing all these things, because you feel like, in a way, that is to kind of control how you feel.
For sure.
For me, it was just, that was basically kind of the control piece of just like, I got to do something. I can't feel helpless.
Yeah.
And throughout this process, it was like, all right, what else is something I can try? And I don't know really how it happened, but I developed like pretty strong actually very strong health anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, there's got to be a way to kind of manage this. So I just typed it in Google. And one of the first things that came up was this organization called NOCD.
Okay.
And they specialize in helping people, I don't want to say deal with, but I kind of live with OCD.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I don't know if I have OCD or not, but I read the article and it was very specific about health anxiety. And it's like, well, I feel like this could really help me because I'm feeling a lot of these things.
Yeah.
So on a whim, I just kind of booked an appointment, did the whole insurance verification process. They made it really easy. I'm not trying to plug them, but they really are amazing.
Well,
and I got matched up with this psychologist, and they all specialize in NOCD, everyone who works with there. And I just kind of started telling her my story, and she was like, do you think you have OCD? And I was like, I don't know. I've never been tested. Like, I don't think so. And she goes through like the assessment. She asked about my experience. And I just remember saying, it's like, I don't think we need to do anything else. I think it's pretty clear that you have OCD. And I was just basically, from the qualitative data that I was giving her about, what I felt, how honestly paralyzed I kind of felt living with this thing and feeling like I was going to die and being worried about any little thing. And that kind of started, there's a lot of stuff to that I can definitely talk about, but that kind of started that journey of, like we talked about, when you get this diagnosis and you really want control. I think it's normal for anyone to feel that way, but I think if you have OCD, and OCD is not necessarily just like, all right, I need to like tap certain things, or things need to be a certain order, or I need to like do things a certain amount of times. It's really just about the obsessions that you have over anything and kind of the compulsions that you do to soothe it.
Yeah.
And for me, that manifested as health anxiety. And what that looked like for me is like, I spent countless hours on Google trying to understand all the different possible symptoms. Or if I had like this body sensation, I'd freak out. And it's like, all right, I need to go schedule this doctor's appointment immediately.
Yeah.
And any little thing that would set me off having to do with health. And I think that's honestly still kind of a struggle. I think you just learn better ways to kind of cope and deal with it and just sit with it.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was just like, I need to kind of control this. And that's what OCD is. It's like the need to control. Certainty is at the heart of it. Mm-hmm. And you want to do everything you can to not feel it. And then you're learning ways to be comfortable with that. So
yeah,
that was a long-winded way of saying, you intense anxiety at the beginning, and anxiety is never going to go away, and you change your relationship with anxiety. But for me, it just was amplified by learning that I had OCD, and I could have had OCD my whole life and just never knew. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I do think like a lot of folks have test anxiety of some form.
Yeah.
Like I know I think maybe for me, it's like having answers versus not having answers. Like I really, really want answers, but then when the answers are potentially there, I'm like nervous about what they might tell me.
Yeah.
Even though it's like, well, you want it to tell you bad so you can like get better.
Yeah.
There is something for me like when I get anytime still I get any sort of like blood work, I'll when I see it come through my email, I like get a physical response of like I get really nervous and I have to be like, why? Why am I getting nervous? And I think folks will when they hear OCD, they think the tapping or like that it would filter or that it would factor into every aspect of their life, right? They're like have to have their books in a certain color order or like pencils perfectly aligned or just like an organization thing.
Yeah.
But I like what you're saying about this like need to control and that the consuming thoughts and like that being OCD for you. Are there going through the work with like the assessment and then some of the things that you learn from NOCD, is that what it's called?
NOCD.
From NOCD, like, are there suggestions you have for other folks who like maybe might not feel like they have extreme test anxiety, but like want to better manage how they feel about getting results or waiting for results?
Yeah. I think everyone processes things a little bit differently. And I do think it's really unique about the way they treat NOCD. There's really like one gold standard of treatment, or I guess type of therapy, and it's called exposure response and prevention, so ERP. And it's funny, like the more I've learned about OCD, there's a lot of like psychiatrists and even like mental health professionals who are like, regardless of whether you have OCD or not, that type of skill set or that type of therapy is just really good for anyone.
Yeah.
So I think anyone can benefit from it. I'm not a professional, so I can't give you the due diligence that it deserves to explain it. But I think the way I understand it, and I kind of learned it, is that it's really, and people are going to hate this, and I still hate it sometimes, but it's really just kind of sitting with that discomfort. And that type of form of therapy or ERP, it's a really unique type of therapy because it's not designed to last that long. Honestly, she's like the average amount of time I see patients, like when we're actually doing the work, is about 3 months, which for anything with therapy, or anyone who's been a long time, you're like, that's a wild thing to say.
Yeah.
But it's basically designed to make you as uncomfortable as you can tolerate. And I think a really easy way to understand it is if you have a fear of heights, typically the way that people get over their fear of heights is being gradually introduced to experiences that involve heights. And the more time you spend in it, you get a little desensitized and you can go up further heights and all that until you're just like, all right, I don't know if this bothers me anymore. And I think that's a really good way to think about the type of therapy that I was doing. It's designed to make you as uncomfortable as you can tolerate. And you basically rank the things that, that you feel like are things that can kind of activate you. So for me, like a 4, for example, would be like, I go in, I get all this blood work, like you were saying, and I get a response back or get the results back. And maybe I have like an elevated test result. And that's like, I don't know what that means. Or a 10 for me would all the way up to the scale, if we're looking on it, would be like cancer. So if you start with a 10, try to tackle that, it's not going to work out. You're going to be more fearful. So you start chunking it down to the smaller things and you work your way up. And I think what that actually looks like, for example, for the test result is, I remember her saying, is that when you get the test result, you're going to feel anxiety, you're going to feel some sort of feeling. Instead of opening it immediately, I want you to sit on it. Maybe at first for just like 15 minutes. As you get more test results, we'll build it up. Because, I think for me, I always wanted answers, right? I wanted control. Right. And they say, like, at the heart of anything is certainty. And if you can sit with that discomfort, you're really kind of building up that tolerance. And I think, like, something I've learned just on my own is that, we want control, we want certainty. But if you are able to if you try to get answers or you try to understand everything, like that could be helpful in the short term, but I think you really risk building up that resiliency or that tolerance to uncertainty. So just sitting with it without having any idea of what's going to happen or putting any judgment on it is really helpful. And I think there's a lot of like have prescribed to this, but there's a lot of like Buddhist principles, at least that I'm learning, that makes sense to me, where it's just like sitting with things and not being too attached and letting things go, which is incredibly hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's the way I would say it, just for anyone, whether you have OCD or not, it's getting those things and sitting with that discomfort, but not starting at the things that make you so uncomfortable. Maybe like starting a little bit smaller, things that you can actually handle, building up your tolerance to it until eventually you're like, all right, this is uncomfortable, but I can live with it. And for me, it's not spending my whole day ruminating, because that's a compulsion, is ruminating, spending a lot of countless times. And for me, that's what it looks like.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, the exposure piece is like gradual is key, right? Like at one point in my life, I thought it was a really good idea because I'm like super fascinated by sharks, but I'm also very afraid of them. And like every time I go into the ocean, I have the app where like you track the sharks, and I'm like, oh my God, I see them.
They had that app.
What? Oh my God. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to Maine. Like where are the sharks? I'm like, oh my God, there's one close to Maine. And then, and regardless of like what the app tells me, if I'm in the ocean, I'm thinking about sharks. And like the odds of me, well, now I don't want to jinx it. I'm going to the ocean soon. But like it was something where I'm like, I should not be afraid of this every time I go in the ocean, because I absolutely love water and I love the ocean, and like it's actually something that brings me peace, but I'm destroying my own peace by freaking out about sharks. So I decided I was going to do one of those, like, they drop you in open ocean and there are a bunch of sharks around. And I was like, this is great. I'm going to go do that thing. I'm going to be surrounded by sharks, and I'm going to see that they're just like living their best lives. They don't care about me, and I'll be cured. And then, of course, like, I get there, they drop me in the water. There are like 30 sharks all around. And I'm like, sure, they're kind of doing their own thing, but I'm absolutely freaking out because they are everywhere. I'm like, heads on a swivel. And one apparently like started approaching me from the rear because the two guides came up and like stared it in the eyes behind me. And then I was like, oh my God, here I've been like head on a swivel. I've been looking side to side. I've been looking down, but I forgot about my 6. So then I was like, oh my God. So I'm like looking around so much that I actually give myself underwater vertigo. And I'm like, well, I can't, I'm around all these sharks. Like I can't chum the waters. Then they will definitely attack me. So I had to swim back to the boat and puke off the side of the boat. So like they would not eat me and others. And these were like not even sharks that are dangerous to humans. But that to me is like, that's a 10. Like, I could have watched a couple videos of a shark very up close, or like
we'll start you off at Sharknado and work our way up.
Exactly. Great series. So yeah, that's cool. Okay, and I want to talk about some of the other things you do, because I think the pairing, like you said, of like the inner work that you're doing alongside the health journey is important, because one of the challenges I have with our medical system is that it's focused on the symptoms and not the root cause. And it divorces your physical being from your mental, emotional, spiritual being. And I really appreciate doctors who like really take a more holistic approach, but I think a lot of times we find that it's upon ourselves to like create that own approach for us and to do that work separately. And sometimes we know where to start, sometimes we don't. But like I feel like every time we grab coffee, there's like another level you've unlocked. And so I want to hear about some of the other things that you're doing that have felt really meaningful for you, either like with your mental healing journey surrounding it, or physical, or whatever else that is like has really had a deep impact on you that maybe other people haven't tried and might want to try too.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I said, I think when you get this diagnosis, and this is this is a work in progress for me. This is gonna be something I'm living with my whole life. I think you have this propensity to like want to try anything like to understand it's one thing, but honestly, like make you feel more comfortable just being who you are or like living with these things. I think that's kind of what it boils down to. I think there's a lot of different things that you can try. And I think, this is going a little bit back and side note, but I think it's really easy to have these feelings and try different things. And I think a lot of the times you can feel like, all right, I'm feeling really uncomfortable. I seem to need to numb this. So I think that's where, potential addictions come from, or even just like other sources that kind of take you away from your body.
Yeah.
And I'm not one to like say anything's good or bad, but I think something that I've been trying to do a little bit more, and sometimes it's really tough, is be really intentional about not shying away from the feeling and just being more open and not really trying to numb it. So I think I'll kind of say that at first. I think there's certain things that you can do, like anyone would recommend. Like for me, I think movement's really helpful. I know and sometimes it's really hard to do it too, right? Sometimes I wake up and it's like, I don't have the energy or motivation or really desire to like do anything today or like get up out of bed. But I think moving can be really helpful. Something I've been trying to do a lot more of is meditation as well. I think, you can try it and some people are like, I just definitely doesn't work for me. And there's definitely been times I've said that too. But I think it's, we focus so much on, with meditation being mindfulness. But if you really think about it, I think it's kind of more mind emptiness or mindlessness, because you're really trying to create more space and not have things take up more mental real estate and just being a little bit more open. So I think that's something that's really helpful, is just trying to clear the mind in like productive or healthy ways, at least for me. I think also something that's a little off the wall that I've done and that we've talked about a lot. Like I said, mental health is something that I've kind of dealt with my whole life, and it's something I'm really proud of the work that I've done. But I think one of the benefits living in Colorado is the access to different types of treatments that may be a little out of the box. So I started working with a somatic therapist, and I think somatic therapy, in terms of like another form of therapy, is really helpful, especially with anyone who has more of, well, anyone really, but a physical kind of ailment or illness or chronic condition that they're dealing with. Because somatic's really about really getting inside your body and really understanding it, how it relates to how you're feeling. And it just does it in a different way that I think it's really hard to do by yourself. But in conjunction with somatic therapy, my therapist introduced me to psychedelic assisted therapy. And there's been a lot of research, and it's kind of an up and growing like scientific approach. A lot of research is coming out about it. So I started ketamine assisted therapy probably last October. So it's been about 8-ish months, I think. And that was something I've never experienced, right? I don't really have much experience doing drugs in general, recreation or not. And I was like, I have no idea what this is going to be like. I feel like ketamine is like one of those, like, oh, that could be like a really dangerous thing.
Yeah.
But I think the more I got to work with it and learned about it, there's a big difference between doing really any drugs, really, but psychedelics, in this case specifically ketamine, recreationally. And you could just do ketamine and just be like, all right, I did ketamine and have an interesting time. But when you do it therapeutically and you take a lot of time prepping for it, so intention setting, when you create kind of the space that's more therapeutic, and then you actually have someone or have the ability to do the integration work, it's kind of those three parts. It kind of takes on a different meaning. So ketamine was my first kind of dive into psychedelic assisted therapy. And I think it'd be a really powerful thing. Like from a neuroscience standpoint, it targets a lot of different neurotransmitters. And I think the dissociative properties is really helpful because it gets you out of your head and it helps you think about things kind of in a dejected form or kind of removed from your day-to-day thinking, and maybe helps you process things differently or brings other things up to light. And I'm not saying like every single trip is going to be profound or journey is going to be like riddled with epiphanies. And maybe honestly, sometimes you'll have a journey or a trip. It's like, I don't know how I feel about that. Or maybe that was a little bit rough. And I think I've learned that the medicine is going to show you what it's going to show you, and it's going to tell you what you need. And it's not designed to give you answers, right? I'm not doing this therapy. Maybe at first I was. I'm not doing this therapy to like get answers. I think it's more about it's going to bring up more questions or the right questions that you need to like think about or process through. And I think that's a really great part about integration work. And I think the next step that ketamine kind of introduced me to was psilocybin assisted therapy. So mushrooms. Definitely didn't have any experience with that. And once again, it's very different doing that therapeutically versus recreationally. And I think, and this is all legal in Colorado, by the way. There's a lot of regulations. Everything was above board. You have to work with a qualified facilitator. You have to do it in a designated space that's licensed by Colorado. And everything's regulated. Everything, you have to fill out a ton of paperwork. But I think that's
insurance.
Insurance for me didn't. Insurance does not cover psychedelic assisted therapy. My insurance did cover. My insurance didn't cover psilocybin assisted therapy. My insurance did cover ketamine assisted therapy.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And I think it's just finding a practitioner, finding a location that kind of offers that. But that was really nice because they made it a really affordable and entryway into it.
Yeah.
Pretty accessible. Psilocybin is not, or at least with who I do it with, and I don't think it's in Colorado yet. Insurance accepts that, or insurance will cover it. So it's something you have to pay out of pocket, and I'm not going to lie, it can be pretty expensive.
Yeah.
I think finding a practitioner that has a sliding scale, if financial means is a concern for you, and is really understanding, and most importantly, it's someone that you feel comfortable with. I didn't dive into psilocybin therapy. It took a long time to establish that relationship with my facilitator. And I think that's really the most important part, is feeling comfortable of the person who's going to facilitate it. And I think a lot of people, I'm just going on a tangent here, so feel free to edit this.
No, do your thing.
But I think a lot of people feel like, this person's going to guide me through this whole process and like talk me through it. And yeah, there might be like check-ins here or there, but this person is really just designed, at least in my experience, to make you feel safe. I think that's the most important part. And my first psilocybin trip, I'll tell you, with having no experience whatsoever, I decided to do a high dose psilocybin trip because I think that's something that I was looking forward to. I was maybe a little prepared with ketamine. Mm-hmm. So I ended up doing 5 grams of mushrooms or psilocybin. And for anyone who knows anything about dosage, that is a very large dose. That is considered a hero's dose. And potentially an ego death too. And I think if I didn't have my facilitator, it would have been a much different experience. Or if I didn't do the amount of prep, I think I prepped for it for 3 weeks going into psilocybin. And there was this like whole workbook that I got that was very intentional. A lot of different things that help you prepare. But honestly, for never doing it, I didn't know what to expect. I was probably on the ground for half of my psilocybin trip, and psilocybin trips can last anywhere from like 4 hours to 8 hours. I think mine lasted a little over, probably about 5 hours, almost 6 hours. And I was on the ground for maybe half of it. I was probably crying for 3/4 of it. I maybe distinctly remember maybe having like an anxiety or panic attack, and my facilitator was really good, checked in with me, see what I needed, asked if like, did I need to hold something? Did I need to hold his hand? And I was like, yeah, I need someone else to like hold me or like touch me in the appropriate areas. There's a lot of restrictions about what areas you can touch and not touch when you're under the influence of psychedelics. But yeah, I think doing that and like having that experience, there's so many things that kind of popped up, and I won't necessarily go into like what came in my trip. But it was a pretty powerful experience. And I think what I'm realizing now is that when you do this type of work, you don't know what's going to pop up. But for me, it kicked up a lot of things. And there was a lot of other transitionings happening in my life. This is all like beginning of this year, so 2026. And I think it kickstart a lot of things a lot of questions I needed to work on, and a lot of different areas that I felt like I needed to heal, and a lot of trauma that I didn't realize was trauma.
Yeah.
And I think when you're doing that type of work, you have to be prepared to be like, all right, this is not going to necessarily end up with like, oh, I have all the answers and we're going to wrap this thing up in a nice little bow. I think it's really the start of it. Like, oh, this is going to show me areas that I might need to work on or consider. And it kind of starts you on a whole path. And I'm still working on it, even though I had my trip at the beginning of this year. And I think that's what I've learned too. It's like that type of work can last a long time. You can integrate stuff or continue integrating stuff years, let alone months after you have that experience. And then if you decide to have subsequent journeys, maybe other things will pop up. Maybe it's going to be a completely different thing as well. So I think that's just something that I wanted to do. And honestly, it was tough. Like this year has been really tough. I've had a lot of transitions. I felt like I've had a lot of loss. Um, both in like the traditional sense and non-traditional sense. And there's a lot of relationships that I kind of looked at both platonically and romantically, where it's like, all right, I felt like this was my thing. And when you're doing this type of work, you also realize like not everyone can go on that journey with you. And that's really tough. Like there was a grieving period for me and like really understand like, oh, this is grief that I'm feeling. Being able to understand like, maybe people can't show up for me in the way I need, or maybe they don't have the capacity, and that's totally fine. I'm not holding anything like that against them, but realizing like, all right, what are the things that I need? And then also who are the people that I feel like I need, or what are the types of people that can show up for me, and holding on to those dear. I think that's kind of something that I'm going through, and the change of my relationships, the change how I see myself. So that was a long stream of consciousness, just rambling on, which I usually like because this means it's organic. But I think there's a lot of different things that you can try. For me, I lend more into the mental health side of it, but particularly psychedelics, and what that has connected me to as well. So, but I think you can try anything as long as it feels like for you, it's helping you kind of progress or make progress. And that doesn't mean you're going to get the answers. Because honestly, I still feel like I don't have any answers, but at least I have a better direction of like, all right, this feels good and this doesn't feel good. And what am I going to do about that? So,
Yeah. Well, I want to hear like what a session looks like, because I feel like folks who might be a little bit more hesitant, myself included, like I'd want to know exactly like, okay, I'm going to walk in, they're going to check me in, and then they take me to a room. Here's what the room looks and feels like. Here's like kind of the process of them holding that space and how long things kind of take to kick in, and like what you feel. And then like kind of any sort of like integration symptoms, or like is there a chance you feel really sick afterwards, or like, and am I going to be really tired the next day, like kind of what that actual in the moment journey looks like.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'll just talk from my experience.
Yeah.
And I think it differs a little bit from whatever psychedelic treatment or drug that you're using. I think for me, ketamine. So ketamine is more like faster acting and it doesn't last as long as psilocybin. So I think that's kind of one benefit too. And there's been a lot more research on ketamine, even the fact that it's can be covered by insurance as opposed to psilocybin. But I think for me, it doesn't start when you're in the room. It starts, and when I first did it, I wanted to spend as much time as I could kind of getting ready for it, having no experience whatsoever. So I think it takes a lot of intentional work, especially if you're first starting out. I think I did probably at least 2 intention setting therapy sessions with my somatic therapist. And she's licensed to do ketamine. So she was my first ever ketamine session. And then I started getting it somewhere else just because insurance. But, I did the intention setting, and that was like a therapy session or sessions, but it's really talking about like, all right, what do you feel kind of most called? What's kind of coming up for you? And then doing a deeper dive on that. I think you do a lot of preparation. With ketamine, you can eat something light during that day, but you don't want to eat anything too heavy. Everyone's going to react to ketamine differently. I've never had like a strong reaction to ketamine that wasn't expected, but sometimes there are people, especially if you don't have a tolerance. Ketamine is one of those things. Well, I guess any drug is one of those things. Like ketamine, you can build up a tolerance to. So it kind of depends on how much experience you have, how often you're doing treatments, what the dosage is, to kind of determine how you might react. But it's not uncommon for people that maybe have like a physical reaction to ketamine, and sometimes people will get sick and will have some like gastrointestinal issues or kind of be out of it. I was pretty lucky. I didn't really have any of those physical symptoms. But when you've done the intention setting, you show up. And ketamine, there's a lot of different ways to kind of take it. So the first time I ever did it, I had a prescription, which was the craziest thing that I've learned, that you can get a prescription for ketamine from a compounding pharmacy that you can kind of pick up, or they can ship it to you. As long as you're working with a qualified health professional, there's documented reasons why you're doing it. It was just the weirdest thing for me to pick up ketamine and be like, oh, this is like legal. I can walk out of the store with this. But with orally, it's sublingual is what they call it. You take whatever your dosage is that you determine with your healthcare providers. And for me, when I first did it, I had my somatic therapist that was guiding me, that was doing all the intention setting integration. And I was working with behavioral psych nurse or a psychiatrist who has experience working with psychedelics, who can prescribe them. So I had a pretty robust health team then, and I have an even more robust health team now. But they're like these little tabs. It's really hard to kind of describe, but they dissolve in your mouth really easily. And the way that I did it at the beginning, you're supposed to keep it in your mouth for like 10 or 15 minutes and just swish it around. So it kind of dissolves, and then your saliva kind of mixes with it, and your mouth just kind of gets full of just liquid over this period of time. And I would say, never done it before. I was like, after 5 minutes, I was like, I'm not really feeling anything. And after 10 minutes of never doing ketamine and just swishing it in your mouth, it was like, oh, like I'm feeling something. You like, the best way I can kind of describe, you start feeling a little woozy. You start feeling, I think for me, yeah, you just kind of lose sense of like kind of all kind of control. You're really kind of in tune with your body. You kind of just like let go. And there was like, I was like kind of giggling a little bit. And then after the 10 to 15 minutes, you can choose to swallow it, which would have a more profound effect and kind of last longer. Or you can choose to spit it out. And then anything that you've had sublingually is what you're going to do. So I kind of chose to do half of it. I spit half of it out and I swallowed the other half. And I think for me, it was, there's no right or wrong way to do it, but I was laughing like the first 15 minutes. And I think that trip, ketamine is a little fast acting. I think they say it can last anywhere from 45 to an hour and 30 minutes. That one, I think, lasted about an hour 20, but it was so funny. I was like laughing and giggling for the first 20 minutes. And after the trip, you're like out of it. But I asked my therapist, was like, is that normal? And she's like, well, there's no such thing as a normal reaction, but she's like, it's a little bit more uncommon to see people giggle. And it was a really great space to be in.
Yeah.
So I think that was that. The subsequent treatments I've had have been a little bit different in terms of sublingually, you only get 20 or 30%. It's bioavailable to you of the actual medicine of ketamine. There are clinics that'll do intravenously, so with an IV. But the clinic I do it at does intermuscular, so IM, and that's about 80% of bioavailability for the medicine. And that one, same thing, do a lot of intention setting. You go into the room, you're with that one, I didn't have someone with me the whole time. There are medical professionals. There's a registered nurse on that was right outside the room in case anything happened. You get a button if you need to press. But for that one, you're kind of in the trip by yourself, and they come in, they make sure you have what you need. So usually I'd have a weighted blanket. I'd be in a very comfy couch. I'd have an eye mask. They give you a button in case anything happens, so it feels very safe. And honestly, for me, the most important part is the music choice. So shout out to my girl, Emily. There is a playlist or an artist, or I guess a user on Spotify. Her name is Emily, but on Spotify, it's Ketamine Queen. And she's had over like 1,000 guided trips that she's done that she's actually administered the ketamine because she's a registered nurse. And she's created these playlists, and there's 6 preset playlists that I use the first time. And music is so important to have a strong music foundation, at least for me, because that really can help guide and enhance your experience. So you get these headphones, you can choose your music, you can choose to add songs that are meaningful to you or not. So that was all really important. And then she comes in, she gives you the shot, you lay down, same thing, 5 minutes, you don't feel anything. And after that, you're like off to the races. And those things can last 45 minutes to an hour and 30 minutes, at least in my experience. And I think it's definitely more intense with the intermuscular, the shot. I think it's kind of nice. You can also split it up, right? So first time I did one shot, we did a lower dose. And subsequent visits, I did a 45 minutes, I did maybe I split it up into 2 different dosage. So I did one that was maybe like 35%. And then 10 minutes later, she'll come in and do 65%. And that can allow the trip to last a little bit longer and maybe not as intense at the beginning. So I think it just kind of depends. It's trial and error, see what you work. So that was ketamine. After that, you're just really woozy. You can't drive, so you have to have someone pick you up. Or for me, I just take an Uber back home. And then you're kind of out of it the rest of the day. You kind of understand what your body is. Like for me, after trips now, like I'll be out of it and you're really feeling something. But after 3 hours, like, oh, I'm kind of hungry. So I just like went out to grab dinner. And that's kind of totally fine. The first time I was like, oh, I'm going to be on the couch the rest of my day.
Yeah.
So that's ketamine. And the next day you feel like you can work and you can kind of do anything. So that was a ketamine Trent experience 101. If you're ready for it, I can tell you psilocybin.
Yeah.
So psilocybin, similar, a lot more prep work if you've never done it. So I spent about a month preparing for it, using this really helpful workbook. And the same facilitator who was doing my psilocybin was the one who was doing my facilitation for the ketamine treatments that I was doing at a clinic where I was getting shots at. And he was really great. And I felt really comfortable with him because I had all those subsequent ketamine treatments. Psilocybin, a lot more prep work, a lot more intention setting. I think it's really helpful if you have someone who really knows what they're doing, has experience leading these, and honestly, maybe having experience doing psilocybin themselves. It can be a lot more intense experience, especially depending on the dosage, right? I knew I was going to do a high dose psilocybin trip, and people can do whatever they want. I think it's such a helpful medicine. But if you're going to do it therapeutically, I think you really need to do it with someone. I think that's really get the most benefit out of, and it kind of just depends on what your objective is. But doing a lot of prep, a lot more intention setting, that's kind of the same. But then you kind of talk about space. And for me, I'm about to do another high dose psilocybin trip. And the same questions he asked me the first time were like, all right, what do you feel called to? How can we feel like we can prepare the space or the vessel for you to feel most comfortable? Are there any sorts of scents that you really like? So for me, I really like lavender, Palo Santo. Honestly, this is so off the wall for me too, but I went to like a witchy store and that had an apothecary and got like a custom scent.
Nice.
And it's something I would have never done before.
That's awesome.
Are there any things that you want to hold on to, like little totems? Is there anything that you want to set up an altar? I think an altar can be really important. So for me, I had like some crystals, which, like I said, very witchy, very outside of the norm for me, but I was fully embracing it. I had crystals. There was a feather from my somatic therapist of an eagle that she found. So brought that in because it felt like she was with me during the trip. I had some pottery. It's like kintsugi pottery, if you're unfamiliar with the Japanese form of taking broken pottery and building it back together with like a golden resin, golden leaf. Yeah. Any pictures that kind of stand out to you? I did a family genealogy, and I think that was really important for me my first time because a lot of the things that came up during my first trip with psilocybin was a lot of familial stuff, a lot of family energy, a lot of maternal, a lot of paternal, and kind of knowing that for me. And I think it was really helpful having that and doing that work before. So I really look into if that's something that interests you, a family genealogy or kind of a chart. And then it's really sacred, right? For me, I chose to do the psilocybin in a tea form. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can just swallow it whole. You can grind it up. You can do it a tea. You can do something called lemon tagging. So if you have the grinded up psilocybin and you add lemon to it, it's called lemon tagging. And something about the compounds in lemon juice bring out I think the compound in psilocybin is called psilocin. So it makes it more, I don't want to say stronger, but I guess more apparent and enhances the effects of it. But I chose to do tea. I thought it was very ceremonial. I drink a lot of tea. And then after, you're kind of just waiting. And for me, it took a little bit of a long time. I did a 3.5 gram dose for the first, just like ketamine for the first kind of hour. And after I was like feeling something, but wasn't really feeling too much. And he's like, do you want to do a booster? Which we talked about before. And the booster was 1.5. And I was like, yeah, let's do a booster. After I did the booster, immediately I was like, oh God, what have I done? And I wasn't feeling it. Just like, I didn't know if I made a mistake.
Yeah.
But honestly, for me, it felt really good. And then I decided to go. Then I went into the trip, and you can very tell. And for me, it's pretty common that you'll have a beginning, middle, and end. But I think for me, it was the very beginning point of kind of getting into that space. And I can kind of tell the things that were coming up. And then it switched in the middle part, which really was a lot of focus on self. And at the end, it was a lot of just like kind of wrapping things up in the trip. And I think I told you my trip lasted about 5 hours, a little over 5 hours. And it was just like a really powerful kind of experience, and something where I said, you don't necessarily leave with a lot of answers. It brings up a lot of questions, and sometimes you could have really good trips, sometimes you could have really bad. But it brought up a lot of things for me that I felt like I needed to work on. I would only recommend doing any of these types of psychedelic treatments if you feel like you're able and ready to do the work, because it's going to ask a lot of you and you can ask a lot of it. And sometimes mentally it's going to kick your ass. And you have to be prepared to be like, all right, I know this is what, the medicine's trying to show me. I know this is what I want to work on. And I think it just helps bring up a lot of things that you wouldn't have been able to think about before. And it helps remove you in a way that it doesn't feel so personal as well. And it helps you kind of approach those topics that really might have been uncomfortable. But like I said, I was on the ground for half of it. I was crying for 3/4 of it. I'm really glad I had my facilitator, because if I didn't, it would be a much different experience.
Yeah. And I have like a million more questions, but I also want us to just like relax and enjoy the minerals.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you one more, and that is, sometimes I can imagine like I'd be interested in trying something like that, and then I'm not sure how I would tell friends and family. I feel like there could be a lot of judgment or concern, worry surrounding it. Like, do you have these conversations openly with everyone? Do you stick to people you can trust? Or like, how do you share that with people who are close with you, as who might just like be worried about you and not react the way you would want?
Yeah. If anything, I think doing these treatments as long as I have been, I think you stop, at least for me, it was important to stop focusing on what other people thought about these treatments. I think, when I first told my parents that I was doing psychedelic therapy, I don't think they know how to react. They weren't like disappointed or anything. I think they were just kind of surprised.
Yeah.
But I think it's really helpful having a support system, whether it's friends or family. And then, and I'm pretty open and vocal about my own mental health journey and the things that I've experienced. Yeah. And they were really great, because they were just like, if you feel like this can help you, and, their standpoints, like, if you feel like this will make you happier and all that, like, we trust you. And like, I do a lot of research on things where like, we know you've thought this out.
Yeah.
And you're not just going into this blindly. And I think it's also relying on people that you trust, the medical professionals. I would have never done psychedelic assisted therapy if it wasn't for my somatic therapist, if it wasn't for my psychiatrist who was doing the ketamine assisted therapy with injections and doing my psilocybin guided treatments. And I think you just have to realize like, this is something I feel like I need to do. Or you can just realize like, I have no idea if this is something I'm going to like or doing, but it's going in with a curious and courageous mindset.
Yeah.
And just seeing like, maybe this could be something really great, or maybe this would be something terrible and I never want to do again. But I don't think you really know either way unless you try it.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm more open about just telling people like the things that I do. I'm not just like on a soapbox and saying like, this is what I did. But if people ask me, or if it's people that I feel comfortable or have some sort of rapport with, I'll be like, yeah, this is what I did last week. And it usually like elicits some sort of questions.
Yeah.
But I think it is really important having that support system, even if they don't understand that experience or they have a lot of questions for it. Just being like, hey, I know this is what you want to do. And whether it's something I don't understand or whether it's something I would never try for myself, just being like, hey, you're trying to work on yourself. You're trying to improve. You're trying to grow as a person, and you feel like it's healing you. Like, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
And I think it's really helpful kind of surrounding yourself with people, both from like a social standpoint, but also like a medical. Like, I think doing the work, I can't stress how important it is to do integration after. Because if you just do the medicine and don't take intentional time and honestly working with a professional to do the integration work, I think you're really missing out on a lot of the reason why you did it in the first place.
Yeah.
So I think it's important from both a social standpoint and a medical standpoint and a mental standpoint to have all those things in place, or feel like you can get to that point with the people in your circle. But yeah, I'm pretty open. Some people aren't, and a little bit more hush hush, which I think is fine. That's their prerogative and that's their healing journey. But I think, I wouldn't be talking about it so openly if I didn't get some sort of benefit.
Yeah.
And once again, this is not easy work. It's not always like, oh, I'm going to wake up and feel like I had this epiphany or I feel great after this trip. There's been a couple times where I've been like, oh, that sucked.
Yeah.
And I need to sit with that. And I got to figure this out before I do another one.
Yeah.
But in total, I think it's really helpful for me to kind of bring up things. And then also for me, like, this is not a forever thing. I feel like I've gotten as much as I could out of ketamine right now. So I'm actually pausing ketamine treatments. And I think I've had about maybe 10 or 12 over the course since last October. I still feel like there's a lot of benefits from psilocybin. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on. But this is stuff that you don't have to do consistently. This is stuff that you can revisit. And it's really just when you feel ready. And I think that's what I really like. I'm not committing to anything I don't want to.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for chatting a little bit. Let's enjoy the springs, enjoy the silence a little bit.
Yeah.
And thanks.
That was great. Love the hot springs. Glad to be a part of this. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to Mikayla or send a message, and I'm happy to talk to you.
Yeah, feel free to add your questions in the comments, and we'll make sure they get to Trent.
Yeah.
And I am always told to tell you, like and subscribe. That's the only way that we do what we do. So, yeah, thanks, Trent. Bye.